Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Marcus from PCG Discussions, back at it again with another video. We're going to do a discussion today on the ban list and how it impacts the meta. It's going to be a lot calmer than my last one. That one was a pure emotional reaction to the ban list, partially for comedic purposes. You got to see some of my like fun out there side, but you know, hopefully you liked it. Some people may have or may not have, but either way, we're going to talk today about some of the meta implications of the ban list, because I think that this is a pretty good point to talk about, because I think that Blue's in a little bit more of a fragile state than people realize. Impacts on top decks and a kind of a spicy take on the meta, and just going forward, kind of where the meta is going to shake out. So let's first start off with Crimson. So yes, admittingly, from my last video, I'm pretty upset that they did hit Crimson, because I think it is the most skill intensive deck in the game right now. A lot of decision making, a lot of defensive power and plays and like adjustments that you have to make. And I think that like the deck did not deserve a hit this soon, because I think there's some things to like kind of shake out. And I think that there were way more priorities in our game to address. Ready to Rumble, SS4, Rise of the Super Warrior, Boo Unison, Dirty Burst, SS3, Beerus, Android 16. If you're going to address Blue at all, I think, and Android 21, if you're going to address those decks, you know, address anything about Blue at all, I think those fairly deserve to be a hit more than Crimson does. But that the nerf, as I believe it to be, is actually not that bad. So I'll talk about that first, and then we'll get into some of the other cards. So let's get into it. So the Crimson nerf, I did get a question about this, I think either commenting on my last video or another video from somebody asking, you know, hey, is 7-2 possibly going to shake its way into the meta now a little bit because of the nerf to Crimson? The answer is no. Crimson's still probably the best blue leader in the game. And there's another leader that I think is probably going to be better, but I'm going to like save that tech, and hopefully it doesn't get found out until LCQs. And I'm going to start testing now, just to be ready for it in March. Hopefully people don't figure it out. But other than that, I think that there is it's pretty reasonable to believe that Crimson Coup is still Crimson Coup, and here's why. Lots of the games where people were getting, like the game states people were getting to at their awaken points was when they were at 4 life. There's multiple reasons for this. You want your Vegeta super combos turned on. You want to maximize the value out of your Saiyan pitches. So, like, for example, if you were one of those people that, like, your opponent's trying to stall you out, you know, the fact that, you know, for 4 turns, which they're giving you the chance to stabilize by not killing you unless they have, like, some kind of alternative strategy, this would probably be against, like, SS3, Beerus, you know what I mean? So like if you had like, if your opponent was playing kind of a stallier strategy, they may not be attacking you as much. And so this would just allow you to maximize value. And then for the longer the game goes, right, before you awaken, the more value you can generate, because it's a attack draw, right? So you drop 1, take a life, draw a card, you +1. So you can +1 every turn, plus the additional pluses that you get from your cards. So I think that there's some merit to extending the game state to 4, and it not being that big of a deal before the 5 Saiyans can be added underneath the leader in order to awaken. Secondly, the reason why I think that it's still probably better is because, and I think the argument may be able to be made for the like Reborn Soul Striker or Original Soul Striker, that you could in fact possibly benefit from playing those over Crimson. And I think that there was a top, I think in Australia, of Soul Striker Reborn. So we may be able to see a little bit of a shakeup there. And both of the Soul Strikers and Crimson just can play the generic good blue stuff, which is just nice. And I think that if every color could eventually get like a leader that kind of does that without having like 12 to 16 cards like Golden Frieza does, that is like engine dependent, but you can just generically play it, it's good stuff like Icarus did, right? Then we could, I think that, you know, green, right? I wish there was just a generic good green leader to play like good green stuff right now. I think that the meta would look very diverse. And as far as Crimson is concerned, I think it's still the best of those three leaders to do that because of the fact that it has Self-Awakening, which means you can have more control defensively, get yourself down to 5 for that blocker negate, and play a little bit of a different game maybe than you did before, and certainly over those other leaders. Self-Awakening is never a bad thing because there's certain matchups where you're going to need it. So I think that Crimson is here to stay still. Now, moving on from that particular part of the discussion about Crimson and whether it's the best leader, God Sealing is a pretty big deal, okay? When I talked about God Sealing in my last video, my primary concern was addressing the fact that, and where I'm upset with it, and still am, was from the perspective that there are far more meta warping cards, game state warping cards, and future card design issue cards in the game, if you let them stay and boot God Sealing, which is why I said I would take a better ban list, reset button, hold up, try again, and leave Dark Brawly as it was if we were to, you know, not have God Sealing banned and replace it with Boo Unison, Ready to Rumble, or Dirty Burst, right? So, and I'm not going to trash God Sealing like I did, the hit to God Sealing, I should say, like I did in the last one. But I am going to talk about why it's an extremely important hit. So this is primarily going to reflect in the blue v blue, as well as any generic good boss card that decks may not have been able to play against blue, but now they can. Future Trunks, 8-drop that doesn't have Deflect, but it's got like Barrier, Double Strike, Blocker, and Barrier, Double Strike, Blocker, Dual Attack, right? So it's got all the keyword skills but Deflect. And now it could be a viable card to play in yellow, right? So we could be seeing the emergence of some of these other boss cards that really didn't have a chance to shine due to the fact that God Sealing was in the format. And now, here's the thing. I still don't think that that's going to replace the better cards that we currently have, but it is an option if those boss cards could be cited or teched in as a 1 or a 2 of to help against certain meta matchups. And I think this is worth looking at. That's the first problem. The second thing, and I'm going to talk about this as a good, and this can be interpreted as a good or bad thing. It just depends on your style of play. There are decks that massively get buffed by this nerf, okay? And this is primarily every blue deck that plays Rise of the Super Warrior, all of which are primarily stall and control decks. And now they don't have to worry about their draw 4 not working because God Sealing was truly like the only real way to address those cards outside of yellow playing Cold Bloodlust, Death Blaster, or the 17-18 Sibling Absorbed. Super 17 Siblings Absorbed. I think that's what it is, SCR. So what do I mean by that? So now SS3 just gets to, in the mirror matchup, draw 4. And that can be problematic, right? Like SS3 now can just do what it wants and get over the hump and kind of just annihilate over out-advantaging you. Because one, when they get to 6 energy, they don't charge anymore. So they draw for turn, that's a plus. They attack with their leader, that's a plus. If they have Boo Unison on the board, that's a plus. And now Rise of the Super Warrior, that's a plus. That's now 7 cards in their hand that they didn't have in their last. Yeah, 7 cards in their hand that they didn't have in the last turn. And that's a pretty big deal because they get a 30k attacker that's also a blocker that will stand itself at the end of the turn and potentially draw 4 cards. Beerus and the Dende Goku and 7Ku now can just trifecta blow you out, right? They can play, Super Warrior into whatever, into Kaioken, into S17, turning the tide into whatever, another Rise of the Super Warrior or whatever they can stack in that turn, right? So that's kind of problematic. And Rise of the Super Warrior not getting hit on the list, which, again, I'm not the only YouTuber that thinks that card is just an obscene card, right? Draw 4 for 6 energy, yes please, because of Baby Hatch or because of some other kind of card that is just broken, or Beerus's win condition, right? So God Sealing being gone means that these strategies are going to fly forward. Overwhelms are now much safer because generally, unless you're playing against green and it's 7 or less, it's gonna get hit by Charismatic. You have to watch out for that. Sometimes the yellow one, which was kind of considered the weakest, but is also kind of strong, because if you can rest a card and get a blocker, basically you punish your opponent's play while giving yourself an extra defense. And we all know how good blockers are. That's why the blocker negates are great. But God Sealing was always one of those cards that stood as the boogeyman as long as your opponent's units had 2 or more markers, and you always would play around it. And now you're not forced to play around it. This also indirectly kind of buffs the emphasis of Boo, because now that God Sealing is not nearly as pivotal, there may be less reason to play other unisons, especially because of Black Smoke's existence, that are not 3 or higher. And if you're going to go with one that's 3 or higher, you might as well go for blue, especially if you're a ramp deck. And which a lot of the decks that are in the meta, that being Beerus, SS3, 7Ku, and the Dende Goku, all pretty much are. Dende from the East Kai, Beerus for 7Ku, all the Whis that ramp for Beerus itself, and SS3 has natural ramp in and of itself. And so they're naturally, and Android 16 as well, they're going to, and Android 21, basically all the ones that I complained about in my video for blue. Anyway, they're going to ramp and therefore get to Boo faster. And this is, there's no reason for them not to, right? When all those decks basically can play, a Boo unison a turn faster than Crimson, or on par because of their ramp, depending on who goes first with Crimson, then why not? And you're essentially losing the game if you don't. Now, the other implication, and this is very problematic for blue, is finding a good point. A good point, I should say, but a good card, a good set of cards to give it some counterplay juice. Now blue doesn't really have that, and it's kind of a problem if you haven't really looked at the card pool. We have Absolute Release Ball, which there's only real 2 other than Dirty Burst, which is just staple at this point for blue, but we've got Absolute Release Ball, and we've got the God Slicing Black Kamehameha. Okay, God Slicing is a little bit iffy because of the fact that it just is 2 energy, or it's going to be a -3. And the problem, okay, is that God Sealing could help address floodgates. And now decks like SS3, Blue Baby, and Gamma with Android 13, in the blue mirror match, unless you're at 4 or less life with Absolute Release Ball, or you have the God Slicing and you want to pitch 2 other cards, it may be kind of problematic. And both of those things have limitations on their level. So basically anything right now in counterplay range for blue If it's 5 and 6, it's basically safe. If it's 7 or higher, it's still susceptible to Dirty Burst. And God Slicing is 2 energy or pitch 2. And then the Absolute Release Ball is only active when you're 4 or less life. So we have a little bit of a problem here. And this is definitely going to help yellow, green, and black, and red. Because now, like, they're forced to play these cards that may be a little bit suboptimal to address their issues. And this is kind of a problem that Blue's going to have to solve going forward, in my opinion. I think that it's going to kind of... It's a really weird position on how Blue interacts with your opponent now on their turn. And I totally get it. God Sealing that 1-of card just comes down, stop that play, pass your turn. I get that. That's annoying. But the other issue that I have is that there's lots of cards with Deflect anyway. In fact, most good cards that are low to the ground have Deflect written on them or are not worth it. Which is one of the reasons why when I was upset in my video about God Sealing, I'm not really sure if I mentioned it. I don't think that I did. Most good cards right now, like the 4-drops in Gogeta, right? The 8-drop that's played for 2 in Sin. You can just go down the list of cards that people continuously play, right? That are either God Sealing is not going to be good for this, and or it's just got Deflect on it anyway. So why are we hitting this card? And it's one of those things where because we've hit it and the current position that Blue's not put in because of it, you have to factor all of that in now, right? So if you play like Absolute Release Ball, right, and you play Goku Black, God Slicing, or, you know, the God Slicing Black Kamehameha, it's not really worth it, man. Like, it's just really not. If you play against Gogeta, it's just really not. If you play against Sin, still going to be Dirty Burst. Again, there's no good way to justify pitching 3 cards to hit a Dredge Destroyer, right? There's no good way to say, I'm going to tap an energy just to untap or play it for free and do whatever with Absolute Release Ball, just return it to the hand. Even if it's limit 1, it's still going to come down the next turn. But I'll talk about Sin here in a minute. And so I think Blue has kind of a problem to solve with this, and I think that's good for a lot of other strategies, right? That's a very big plus for yellow, green, and black, as well as red. And it's kind of a problem for Blue in and of itself to struggle to find a good answer to Floodgates. And Floodgates are, again, one of the big reasons why I think the God Sealing needed to exist, so that there's just a free out to a card like Ready to Rumble that will literally force your opponent back turns just to play the game. Because, honestly, Ready to Rumble pseudo acts like a baby hatch. And for 4 energy, if I could do that in almost every deck and afford it, I would. I just would. But we can't. So, moving on. Gogeta's hit is less than, it's abysmal. It was a terrible hit to the deck. I mean, I talked about it in my previous video, but just to summarize it here, if you're going to address Bean cards, Senzu Bean just needs to be banned, right? It just needs to be banned. Secondly, if you're going to try to address Gogeta's defense, I still don't see how this does it, because if we really want to play an effect like this, we could just play Imposing Presence instead. Thanks for the extra free space to do that. As well as that card didn't really put the deck over the edge in any way, shape, or form. It was all the cards that say Pot of Greed. So it's one of those things where I'm glad they didn't hit the deck in a severe way. Like they did Sin, and I'll get to that as the last one. But it's also one of those things where, like, it's not that big a deal if you're a Gogeta player, because you have Unending Awakening and you have Imposing Presence. And the combination of both of those cards are super strong. So I would recommend playing both in your deck and maybe subbing out a couple other negates or supplementing those negates in over your Goku Bean. Moving on to Sin Shenron. I think Sin Shenron is about to see its final days at the top as a red deck. I don't think it's the best red deck in the game. I think that Gogeta is now definitively the best red deck in the game. I think Sin's problem here that a lot of people are not giving really enough credit for is the fact that it essentially contributes to its biggest weakness. I've talked about this with pros at Nats, friends, playtesting group, locals, the whole 9 yards. Sin Shenron's biggest problem is that if you've weathered the storm past turn 4 and you're in somewhat of a good spot, you've probably won the game. Why? Because Sin Shenron fails to generate advantage like other decks do. Now, this is one of the reasons I play the Unison build, okay? The Unison build allows me to play the 1-drops, which are going to draw me a card. I'm then going to be able to use the Haze Shenron primarily as a 1-drop to then apply crit pressure, which is going to cost you more cards. And then, or you're going to take damage that's not going to give you cards or negate. And then the flip side of that is that there's lots of draw between like the leader and the Nova. And, just being able to net advantage that way. And if you don't have a good game plan to do that, right, that extra draw every turn is free with the leader, with like the Haze and the Oceanus. And if you don't have a good way to generate that or force your opponent to start spending cards, things start to get a little bit iffy. And Sin's going to have some very interesting decisions to make going forward. For example, the famous turn 2 play for at least the Unison build. Play Unison, look at the top 3, do whatever. Get 6 Dragon Balls, draw 6. Untap your leader, untap an Energy Awaken. And then play Dread Destroyer. Activate Unison ability +2 to play down Haze. And then swing with Dread Destroyer. Activate Haze Shenron if they don't negate. And then stap Delusion Power or a Beer Super Combo to buff it to 30k, 35k, maybe if you combo a little bit more, double strike. And critical. And now the issue is that that's just going to be double strike. And the thing that Sin struggles against is 1, if you can deal with their board every turn. And 2, if you can, which inadvertently, if you can out-resource them because you've dealt with their board, then you've got a problem. So if you kill the Unison and you kill Nova Shenron, they lose out on a severe amount of draw power. Why? Because now they have to spend an energy to play a Haze to draw a card, where it was free before. And then you were going to get the Haze effect as an activate battle to increase it to crit, so it didn't really hurt that much, right? On top of that, if you remove Nova, then you deny them an extra free plus every turn. So just by dealing with those 2 cards alone, you force Sin into a really kind of hand-troubling position. And to make it worse now, all of their cards are swinging at you for honest strikes unless you're playing like Intensifying Power Trunks or the Crit Guy or Crit Frieza. And Crit Frieza is going to now cost you energy. So it's one of those things where like I feel that Sin is no longer a top red deck. This is the hot take in the meta. And here's why. Blue already had a semi-easy enough time if they went first. Now it doesn't matter if they've gone first. Because the crit pressure is something they will take all day. If you went first against Gogeta, literally, and shouts to Marcus McKinney, because, I totally agreed with this statement already before he said it, but if a Sin Shenron player struck at you for a double strike critical 30-35k, nobody in their right mind in Gogeta was going to ever out-combo you to take it. They may combo, charges the energy, add another card, and take the crit. It's a 1-for-1 trade that's going to eventually net them more advantage on the next turn. they're going to draw 5 cards. It's not worth on their next turn. It's not worth for them to even attempt to do anything in their hand and wasting resources toward it. Now you're just going to straight give Gogeta 2 more cards, 3 more cards potentially, and this is a pretty big problem. And I think that Sin's, now I can just draw all the pieces that are in my life to my hand and turtle up into more of a game state that's proper for me. And then the question is, what do you place the Sin with, right? And the automatic choice is like, oh, well, the Natron, which isn't as good, but we'll go with that one. There's multiple problems with it, though. He doesn't do anything for you beyond, like, search the top 5, which he is consistency. So with the Gogeta Unison, he's that free plus replacement. But it's like, yeah, that's all he is. So what do you do with it? And it's not like GT Goku, right, which is the apt comparison for like the little one-drop GT Goku that searches top 5 for Gogeta, because the leader can combo with it while it's in rest mode. Can't really do anything with the Natron Shenron. And so now it's just going to be basically free minus bait for like Vegeta or something if they don't have another target that's more important to minus, or free attacks for blue at it, because they're not trying to strike you at your life anyway, because you'll kill them faster. And so that's not a very good replacement. The Oceanus, if they had the energy, you could sack it off the board and therefore make them attack your Unison or your life. But you've just given them like more targets for blue to stall you out to make their game plan function better. And so it's honestly not that easy to kind of find the good replacement for him. And that pressure is actually something that there could be some testing to figure out if it's safe to take the double strike right away. And now the Sim player has to worry about, well, if I dump the Deluge here or the super combo here, right, is that very good? The answer might be no, and Raditz might even become the default choice of super combo for Sin Shenron. So I think that Sin is actually the worst of the top 3 red decks and may fall quite out of favor in success rate because of it. I don't think that it's as strong as a deck as people make it out to be. And here's why. I'll give another piece of that. Its primary opponent, which is blue, did not get addressed in any of the proper ways. So imagine a game state where blue somehow, which they will, get to Boo Unison, and it has all the same cards that it already has. Group Leader Pilaf, the Beerus Destroys card, which is absolutely overpowered beyond all reason. It is like head and shoulders above literally every other card that is in the same category of like plus 10k doing effect. It's so far above all of them, it's not funny. It has the Gohan rare now, and multiple like really good generic good cards that are just good against you. UI Kamehameha. If you're playing Crimson, you got the Draku, and your pressure starts to look pretty bad, right? So and I'll just say this, one of the replacements I have thought of, because I think it's a broken card in Gogeta, is Unbreakable Super Saiyan Goku. It's a GT Goku, right? And it counts towards your awakening, as well as it's 20k, so it union fusions correctly with the Gogeta. And that card specifically also is really strong in shutting energy off, so that when you get to 5, 6, and 7 energy in Gogeta, if you charge that high, if the game's not over by then, thanks Dirty Burst, you're going to be able to tap that energy out to then combo to facilitate your Z Awaken, as well as in the early game have it so that you can combo it and then effectively use a GT Goku target later in the game and proc your leader effect, right? A GT Goku effect. You can use that GT Goku effect, proc your leader effect, basically draw 2, as well as get that free Z charge to enable your Awaken, and then use it for a Union Fusion if you draw it later. So it's one of these things where, like, right? If you play that card and you're playing Sin, and you swing with a Dredge Destroyer and it's just 20k, and they have an energy up, and you didn't combo any more than that, well, I'll draw 2 and not take this double strike. So that whole pressure is just kind of stopped. And it's kind of problematic if you ask me. So what it means for the rest of the meta is I think green and yellow and black all got a buff, but black still sucks. So Bandai, if you watch this, please don't be hurt over my last video. But hear me, and community, hear me. It might be time for black to get Thwarting the Dark Empire back to 4, maybe, because it needs something to make it relevant. And I know that they're probably going to focus on making black a little bit stronger in their next set, which I hope they do. But we're not going to get Banlist for a while. And I think that they want to do these slight adjustments before Worlds, honestly, just to kind of see how the meta will shake out in shape for last chance qualifiers before Worlds. And then I think more will come after that, but we'll see. That's pretty much it for this video, guys. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section down below. And hopefully you found this one to be a lot more rational discussion of the ban list and its implications. And I hope you found the last one funny. And Merry Christmas. I know that weird flash freeze cold front came through and screwed up a lot of the country here in North America. So if you, I hope you're all safe. I hope your holiday travels have been safe. I know a lot of flights and stuff have been canceled. So wherever you are, stay safe, stay warm. And I will see you guys next time. It's Marcus from TCG Discussions signing off, and happy holidays. Laters.